Welcome back to another episode of Sephardic U Presents, where we explore the weekly parasha and uncover its deep meaning. I'm Nathaniel Poole, joined by my co-host Sam Bendayan.
Shalom, everyone. This week we're diving into the Parashat Pekudei, the final parasha of Sefer Shemot. We're wrapping up the construction of the Mishkan, seeing how everything comes together and discovering what this means for us today.
That's right. After weeks of details about measurements, materials, and craftsmanship, we finally see Moses oversee the grand completion of the Mishkan. But it's not just about the physical structure. There's a deep spiritual message here.
And that's what we're going to explore today. We'll be discussing questions like, why does the Torah go into such detail about the Mishkan's completion? What is the deeper message behind Moshe's final inspection? And why does Hashem's presence only descend after everything is complete?
And as always, we want to hear from you, our live audience, so let's get into it. First section is as Sam said, the heart of the discussion, and the Mishkan is finally complete, but why so many details? So the Torah has already described the Mishkan's construction in both Parashat Terumah and Tetzaveh. That's two parshiot, and now we're in Pekudei, and it repeats the details. So I want to ask everybody, why do you think the Torah is emphasizing everything again? We'll open it up to any answers here, and let's go from there.
So, I mean, the first thing which I've kind of mentioned already in a few other podcasts, but in with some of the material I've read on ancient history, this was a style of writing that was in use in very ancient civilizations where they would be very repetitive. And the reason behind it was that they wanted to show the instructions and then what was actually done separately in great detail so that the reader could actually compare what was said in the instruction to what was actually built.
Well, it's better to have this because we have the oral Torah, we have the written Torah, and here it's in detail, so it's precise. But why three parashot?
Yeah, and it's interesting because if we do have the oral Torah, you could ask the question, well, then why does it need to be written in such detail? Why doesn't it just say, yeah, just do it like I told you in the mountain, as it does in other areas, right? But in this area, it didn't. It actually keeps repeating the detail over and over.
I believe it is easy to start a task, harder to finish it. And with the fickleness of the Hebrew people, therefore Moshe Rabbeinu is very hesitant. He's worried. Are they going to stop? Are they going to have another Egel? And that is why he is very cautious, and as they finish, and it is as God commanded. And it is also an echo of the book of Genesis, that every day there was completion and it was good. This was the first day and it was done. And I believe this was to reinforce. It is easy to start the journey, very hard to complete it.
Good point.
That's interesting, and it brings me back to something I learned in college. Believe it or not, it had nothing to do with the Torah, apparently. But as we know, the Torah has everything to do with everything. So, what I learned was there was a course I took on managerial psychology, and it talks about different personality types of like managers and CEOs and all that. And one of the types was the arsonist, is what it was called. And these are people that like to start things but can never finish them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it was likened to a person who starts a fire here, and then while that's burning, he starts another one. And the idea is that if you let people like this have a free reign, they will burn down the whole company. Everyone will be confused, nothing will get finished. And so you have to balance them with other people who are going to stop them and say, hang on a second, let's finish the first fire, right?
Right.
Finish the
Right.
first test before we get to the second one. So,
Well, Sam, all good points, and Sammy also mentions in the chat it's an accounting of the materials used, and I also noticed James started to say something. James, you want
Yeah,
to add to this?
well, it's keeping everything above board. And think about the amount of wealth that is going into the tabernacle.
yeah.
You want to make sure that all of that is accounted for.
Right.
Agreed.
Very good point.
Yeah, as we see, if we look at, I don't know, the last few decades, you can see the amount of damage that has been done to people's faith by religious figures who entice people to worship them, and then their human flaws are discovered, and then the crushing effect this has on people's faith.
Well, I think Sammy and James nail it on there with the one explanation is that the repetition shows us the importance of accountability. Moses gives a full report to Bnei Israel, all the Israelites, showing that everything collected was used properly and there was a purpose. And there's complete transparency in the leadership.
That is correct. And that is why it starts with Pekudei. It is the accounting. He is giving account to the people of what is happening, what happened to all the material they gave so willingly and generously.
So is this the first documented instance of Doge in history?
It could be. Yes.
Well, actually, Teruma was.
Yeah, but here he actually made the audit, and sorry, go ahead.
Preceding that was Noah's Ark. The details put in, 600 cubics by this, by that.
No, but here I'm talking about the audit that Moses did at the end, and he actually came back. Look, this is how I use the material you guys gave me, so that it's fully transparent, and nobody can accuse me of, keeping some for myself or whatever the case might be.
Right. And it's an important message for today, especially for leaders and those in positions of responsibility, whether it's in business, community service, or even running a household. Accountability builds what? Trust.
Builds trust. Absolutely.
And in the parashat of Korah, Moshe Rabbeinu is going to say, I have not taken anything from anyone.
That's right, yeah.
And the prophet Samuel also is going to say the same to his people. Have I ever taken anything from any of you?
That's right. That's right. And, we're always looking for a tie between the parasha and the real world. What's in the headlines nowadays for the last few weeks has been Doge, right? All the transparency and all the waste that's being found and everything. So, again, very interesting.
Wonderful.
Well, Sam, let's talk about the spiritual meaning behind the Mishkan's completion.
So the Mishkan wasn't just a building, right? It was meant to bring Hashem's presence down to earth.
Right.
But its presence didn't descend. Here's a very interesting question. It didn't descend until everything was completed, right? You didn't see the presence come down as it was being built. It actually waited until everything was completed. So who's got an answer to this? Who has any thoughts about this?
Well, it says that God at first created the world for man, and after man broke that covenant, it behooved him to build another sanctuary for now. It was up to man to build a dwelling for God. The tables have been reversed. God says, I built a world for you and you destroyed it. Now, show me your true adherence to the covenant which we have renewed. And this is how it is. It becomes the indwelling. I will dwell among you. I think that is why there was such details in everything to show that the dedication of the people and their devotion to the renewal of the covenant.
And I think anyone who's a parent knows that the true growth of a child is when he realizes for himself that he has to do something, and then he does it by himself without the parent having to push him and goad them and threaten with punishments and all that. That's when the child comes full circle. And it's only when the child goes out on his own to a certain degree, some more than others, that they discover this. And then they can come back to the parent and understand everything, the whole cycle, why the parent did what they did, all the pushing, all the punishments and all the unpleasant things. And then everything is understood. So again, we see here the repeated theme that this universe and this world was created as a partnership, right?
Correct.
God is not our butler that we can just ask for things and expect them. We have to be involved. There's something we have to do.
That's great points. The Midrash says that God's presence only rests when there is unity and completion.
Right.
I mean, how can God come down or be in our presence with an incomplete Mishkan? Right? If one element had been missing, his presence wouldn't have descended. It teaches us that every detail matters, not just in the Mishkan, but in our own lives too.
Correct.
And
it could also be interpreted, and I'm sorry to step on your thing here, Sam, on your usual shtick here, Sam. But it could also be interpreted as some sort of spiritual transceiver.
Explain that.
So are you referring to the device that some say was in the ark?
I mean the Mishkan itself.
Okay. You mean as a way to receive and send messages?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So that
that is very good. That is correct.
Right.
Because now there is going to be a transition from Sinai. The people are going to move from Mount Sinai on their way to Canaan. And therefore, there is no longer the receiver. The Mount Sinai is no longer the receiver. It is going to be the Mishkan. And that is why in Vayikra, God is going to talk to Moshe Rabbeinu from the Ohel Moed. There is a transfer from one holy site to another.
Right. And again, delving into the more kind of interesting sources I've read, there's a lot of talk about how the ark actually contained a device called the Devir, the speaker. And they say that this could have been a device where you could actually hear messages, or somehow, maybe not hearing, but somehow there was a transmission of messages there. We're talking about something physical here. And as we know, as we've said many times, the ark had a very peculiar construction using wood and gold, which, as we know, their insulators and superconductors are rated in a certain kind of order. And we do know, again, from other parts of the Tanakh where people were killed by touching the ark at a certain moment. And so there's a certain mystery about the ark that a lot of people are still trying to unravel. So all these things are possible. Now, there is something else I wanted to touch on the topic of completeness. So this actually holds a very deep mystical teaching from the Kabbalah. And this is that when the universe was created because Hashem voluntarily receded. He constricted himself in order to allow an area that was outside of his control. Prior to this, Hashem was everything, and everything was Hashem. It was all one gigantic unity. But how do you create something? How do you create a space where God is not present, right? And many people complain about this world, right? God is not here. Some people say God doesn't exist. According to the Kabbalah, what happened was God constricted voluntarily, made himself smaller so there could be a space where God's presence was not in control and sometimes not even visible. So the way this is done is by creating kind of like a universe where partiality exists. So for example, if you look at darkness, darkness does not exist on its own. It is simply the absence of light that creates darkness. So when the light comes in, we see darkness disappear. And so what this shows you is that it's not that darkness exists, but it's that something is missing. So Hashem's very nature is completeness. And so he could not have appeared then, therefore, in the ark before the ark was complete, because this is actually the model that was used for the entire universe.
He couldn't have appeared within a shattered vessel.
Correct.
Exactly.
Correct.
And that's another term from the Kabbalah, right? The shattered vessel. And so this is kind of displaying a certain rule that God set up to constrain even himself. And so a lot of us ask, well, why isn't God here with me? Why doesn't he answer my prayers? Why don't I hear a voice? This is the reason why, because God, in order to give us free will and a real choice between good and evil, he had to excuse himself.
That's right.
From the universe to a certain degree. So if you look for him, you can find him. And if you want to run away from him, you can, right? You will suffer consequences. But there is a place for you to run to where he cannot control. So the whole thing's very, very interesting Kabbalistic lesson.
Well, even the cloud, that cloud is actually at night. It was the same cloud. There was not a pillar of fire and the cloud. It was that at night it was illumined in order for the Hebrews to know that God's presence was always indwelling. That's exactly what you said, that darkness is only the absence of light. Exactly. And that cloud could only, it was always present, but at night it became illumined in order for the people to know God was always here.
Right. And this also has a very encouraging lesson, which is many of us often say, why is evil so powerful? Right? Why do the evil succeed? And in the movie Star Wars, right, they're always talking about the power of the dark side. And so which side really is more powerful? And according to Judaism, there is absolutely no contest. There's almost not even two sides. It's just the side of light, and then there's the other side that is missing something.
Well, yeah, and that's
right.
And bringing that back to Star Wars, that's also what Yoda says. Not stronger is the dark side. Quicker, easier, not more powerful.
Right. Now, but it's like I think that comment is even falls short, because the dark side can only exist when light is not there. So there is no contest when they're both in the room. So it's very, very interesting. So some people might wonder then, why do I suffer so much? And the answer is that you're in the darkness. You have to step out of the darkness and get into the light. And then your suffering will diminish.
Well, that is why we have the positive commandments and the negative commandments also. It is, you can get out of that darkness.
Right, that's interesting. It's like bringing light and getting away from darkness as well.
That's right.
Yes.
Also think of this as the satisfaction one gets upon completing such an arduous or detailed task as well, or something so challenging. How many times have you worked hard to complete something and it wasn't until you were done with it that you realize its full impact?
Right.
Which makes it even more valuable, even more holy, one could say.
Right. And why does Hashem create a world where completion generates satisfaction? Interesting.
So we can go to the next step.
Right.
Now.
It's right. Exactly. So we can go to the next step.
So let's talk about Moshe's role and humility And, you made the example earlier, Sam, about with the Kabbalah and how God shrinks his responsibility. I don't see him in a world that he's not at, but I do see him as a delegator. Here's all the tools. Here's how I've made you. Now continue on with the tools that I've given you. And this same way, you see Moses steps aside. So one of the most interesting moments in this parasha is Moses's final role. He supervises the work, ensures it's done properly. But when the Mishkan is finally completed, God's presence fills the space, and Moses steps back.
Absolutely. Absolutely, which is quite the opposite of what you see from most religious leaders, right? Where they will insert themselves as a middleman in between the people and God.
It's unlike most human leaders.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at, just look at what's happening right now with this whole Doge phenomenon. There are still many people in government complaining about this. How could you possibly complain about somebody who's trying to cut waste and make things more efficient? And the answer is that, hey, if you get rid of that, that's me. That's where I am. I've inserted myself as a middleman. You're taking me out. And so they have nothing left but to admit what they've done and expose themselves in front of everybody. And this is what's going on. And so it's what Moses does is truly remarkable. And he does it over and over again in the Torah, where he just keeps taking himself out of the picture. And
that's what I love about him or admire him. True leaders empower others and don't seek the spotlight. And we see this again later in the Torah when Moses prays to Joshua to succeed him. And he genuinely wants people to thrive even without him.
Absolutely. And there's in one of the parashas we're going to read in probably a couple of months, where there's a point in time where God takes some of the spirit of Moses and he puts it on the elders, and then there are two elders in the camp who start prophesying. And Joshua tells Moses, stop them, arrest them. And Moses said, "Are you jealous for my sake?" He said, "I wish all of Israel were prophets." And so this is, you can see his focus, where it's not, he never wanted the job to begin with. He took it at the insistence of Hashem. He did it, and then he stepped out of the way. And this is our destiny, is to melt into the presence of Hashem. And when we have all done this, this will be probably the fulfillment of creation, is when all beings can get to the point where they can reintegrate themselves into Hashem. So this is the ultimate goal, and the way to ultimate bliss and happiness and contentment, I believe, is this. And so these leaders who try to insert themselves in the middle, what they do is they start inviting evil upon evil, because now they have to do things to maintain their power. And we see every politician on earth does this. They got to start, and then, hey, if I got to kill somebody, well, I got to kill somebody. I got to start a war, I got to start a war. And then all this evil follows, but it all starts because they want to insert themselves and hold on to power. This is the original sin that brings everything else after it.
Well, this is why. Sorry, go on.
That is why Parashat Pekudei this year is completed with the Haftarah of the Para Aduma, to show again, to warn us against the sin of deification of the person and of the aggrandizement of the person.
That's a great point. It's also one of the rare times that Pekudei is read by itself and not joined with Vayakel. So imagine comparing with the times, right? You talked about the Doge, and here it is specifically separated from Vayakel, and we're talking about the accounting.
Also, if I'm not wrong, what you're talking about is parasha the para adama being read along with
Pekudei.
No, it was along with the previous parsha. So you get
Vayakel.
Yes.
So you get so with Para Adama being read with Vayakel, you get the sanctification of time in the Shabbat, the sanctification of space in the Mishkan, and the sanctification of the self in the Para Adama ritual.
Very
Beautiful.
That's a very good
That's
observation.
awesome, James.
Very good.
So
rabbi material here.
I know this is definitely a lesson for us all, and we have to end on James' final words here. So it's a perfect transition, but it's a lesson for us all, whether we're parents or politicians or teachers or community leaders. A great leader doesn't hoard power. They build something that lasts beyond them. So that's a wrap for this week's Parashat Pekudei. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. Your insight always makes this discussion so much richer. And to all our listeners, if you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this episode with friends. It helps more people discover Sephardic U and be part of these amazing discussions. So if you want to dive deeper, check out our Torah Insights, Sephardic Traditions, and upcoming live sessions on Sephardic U. And of course, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below or join us live next Sunday at 8:30 a.m. for another engaging discussion. Thanks, Sam, and everyone in attendance today for being part of the Sephardic U community. And we'll see you next time.
Shavua tov.
Shavua tov.